Greetings, chess friends. Today, we're going to see Garry Kasparov, for many, the greatest chess player ever. And I'm really going to focus on his king and pawn endgames today. Many facets of his game are amazing, but I thought this was an interesting one. I found quite a few examples, and let's get started. First one here, Garry with the white pieces. And I like to show the last trade in some of these just to kind of get a sense of who chose to go to the king and pawn endgame, etc. Bishop f7, king takes f7, and let's start thinking a little bit here. Today we're going to talk a lot about passed pawns. Where are the passed pawns coming from? First, I would count the material, but that is equal, 4 pawns each. Passed pawn is coming here. 3 versus 2. White can make a passed pawn. On the other side of the board, black has 2 versus 1, but notice the king is playing a big part in this and harder to make a pawn sneak by with the king standing right there. So advantage white, Garry, 3 pawns over here. And watch how it lures this king's attention. Okay, first he guards this one. And then b3, if there were a take, he's going to get one of these pawns to go. He plays a3, c4, and bingo, passed pawn achieved. This is going to draw the attention of the king, and then we can gobble up these pawns. Takes, king e4, takes, h4, and black resigns. This, again, a lot of these are going to be ending in resignation, but there's going to be some sort of implied race. Let's say king takes, h5. I suppose king c3, h6, and you can actually see really not even close. White is winning. I have to make a number of checks, but white is definitely winning. Next one, Kasparov, Karpov. The great rivalry. This was from their world title match in '87. Garry, with the black pieces, is on the receiving end of kind of a funny move. Rook e6, king takes f4, king and pawn endgame. And actually only one move keeps the balance here. So these are tense moments. The king and pawn endgame, there's no turning back. There's no counterplay if you get in a worse position. Garry finds it, king e7, and they agreed to draw. Let's look at a few interesting situations, though, that are instructional. If king f7, folks out there, if this is new to you or you're not really familiar or sure of these situations, really pay attention because this is a very big mistake due to king f5 opposition. Follow the colors here. If king g7, we can play king e6. If king e7, we can play king g6. Either way you go, white's king is infiltrating, and white is winning. Let's rewind the real game, king e7. So now what if king f5? Well, we really can just play king f7, and black moves into that opposition. Again, the game might continue e5, take. And here, again, just keep that opposition. If ever this pawn push and we have an exchange, that's a rook pawn, remember? The h pawn will be left alone, the rook pawn. So those should be all draws. This game is a draw, and Garry saved the draw, so a good result for him, down a pawn in this game. Next one here, Kasparov, I believe from a simul. Kasparov exchanging queens on purpose. Again, you think he's thinking about, okay, this is a winning king and pawn endgame. When you play queen takes queen here, and king takes, white is saying this is a winning king and pawn endgame. f5. Again, think to yourself, where are the passed pawns coming from? This one, kind of obvious, because these 2 pawns, e3 and d4, can't move. Although they do get going because white f5 and black answers c5. Black is also thinking, how do I get my pawns moving? He's going to try to sacrifice here. And so that also gives white another passed pawn. Very interesting here. Only one winning move. Again, king and pawn endgames are so tense. And that winning move was found by Kasparov. Of course, c6. And if you really think to yourself, which pawn is for white? Break it down. Which pawn is the fastest or most likely to queen? Right now, it's clearly the c pawn. So he plays c6. D takes e3. This is scary and a very nice, I would say, kind of intermezzo move. F takes g6 check. We're going to see why this is important in a moment. c7, e2. What a race. And c8, queen. But it's often the player who gets the first checks in. White's turn, and that is critical. Queen d7. Also, white's king is very well placed for this, and it's just a wonderful sequence. King takes g6. There are no checks, and black resigns. In fact, it's just plain mate. There is no avoiding checkmate in one here on two ways. So really nice one. You can't make a check. This is just checkmate in one no matter what. Next one here, the opponent plays bishop takes Kasparov with the white pieces. Where are the passed pawns coming from? You need to think about these things. Again, white's king is a little more centralized, so some positives, but clearly here there's the opportunity to make a pass pawn, and in this case, an outside pass pawn. This one has an amazing variation that I want to show. So here, Kasparov plays b5, and again, step one, pass pawn accomplished, right? King a5, and it looks like white is a bit stuck. Kasparov plays h3. He missed a brilliant opportunity here. Check this one out. Can you find it? White to move. G5. Stunning move. Pawn takes g5 and e5. Two pawns sacrificed, and only to play king c5. We had to deflect one and then the other in order to get king c5, which is so powerful that actually black is just checkmated here. b6, e3, b7, e2, b8, queen, e1, queen. And again, whoever gets those first checks in, we have a choice of checkmates we want to play here. So here was the real game. h3, and he still wins this one, but that would have been a really nice move here. Not h3, but g5, and then e5. H3, h6, h4, king b6, king b4. And again, taking that opposition, this one's not lost yet, but d5 actually, I think, throws the game away here because now there is a sort of zugzwang after a very nice finish, h5. I love this move that clamps down on all of the black moves. Black has two or three really bad options. Pushing the pawn, not an option. Pushing the d pawn, let's just look at it, or taking. You want to try to chase me away and take this one? White is just clearly closer and going to round up both pawns. King takes. And this should actually be a pretty easy win. King g6, followed by h6, h7, and h8, queen. So really a cool one. I love h5, and that was it. He resigned. Otherwise, you can move your king. But again, similar to one of the previous ones we saw today, just the king infiltrating, getting in to the other side is really what tips the balance and ends the game. So look for that when you have the opposition and the opponent's hands are tied. You don't have moves. You literally run out of moves when you get to the king and pawn endgames. Let's see the next one. This was cool. I found against a computer in the year 1985. A good year. And capture. Kasparov with the white pieces playing a computer. So these were not so strong. It was called Comp Super Constellation. But evidently it was decent. Getting to a king and pawn endgame with Mr. Kasparov here. But a tricky one with these interesting double pawns. We're up a pawn, hooray. But the double pawns pose some problems. Again, you can see where we could be literally running out of moves. So the positioning of the king kind of jockeying here. King d5, you see we can't move our king forward, but king d3 is a good move here. He plays h4, also good. And the black king has to give ground. Also, black is running out of moves, notice. For example, if h5, maybe king d3, taking opposition, and black has to give ground. Whenever they move, we'll play a move like king d4 or king e4, making progress. Here's the game. King e4 now, king e7, king e5, you can see white is making progress, but very nice technique here. Kasparov clamping down again. Same idea. King e7, and here that real legendary touch, f6. Not an easy move to play. Again, everything is so committal in the king and pawn endgames. There's just no turning back. But after takes, really nice technique here. King d5. Don't play king f5. Actually, king f7, and the game is drawn. For example, here it would have to be like this, but black can basically hold the line. And what to do? Move forward here. Black is the one taking the opposition. King d5, and how does black not just take the opposition here? Because of this move, f5. Not a waiting move, a good move, a forward pawn move, but it just makes black's turn too uncomfortable. They have to move, and we start shouldering them. This is progress. When it's face-to-face opposition, white cannot make progress to any of these three squares. When they make a move, we can actually move here. And that's enough to wedge your way in. Here, again, opposition, but king d6 is going to force their king away, and we can always now threaten the pawn. Here's the game. King e7, opposition, and resigns. Any next move is going to be losing a key pawn, and you'll really lose them both and lose the game. So computers would eventually get Garry, but not for quite a few more years. Really nice one here. This started as a rook and pawn endgame. Just to point out the obvious, every king and pawn endgame was a previous different type of endgame, right? It was a queen endgame or a rook endgame in this case. But this one is just fantastic. Here, rook d7, Kasparov with white. A simul game here, but rook takes g7. Can you believe this? There's no way. The king is so close. Rook takes rook, king takes, but the black king is right. King h7? Obviously, if you move the rook away, we're going g7. But no way. The king is right there. Kasparov had foreseen all of this. And the next move, as well, e6. He's playing a king and pawn endgame, a legendary one. Black is playing with the rook here, but notice the king takes. If you don't take, it's the same. What else to do? King e7, we just promote. So takes, and the resulting king and pawn endgame just won the rook back. The resulting king and pawn endgame with the white king basically already infiltrating. We're already able to wedge our way in, is a winning endgame. Let's see. King e7, opposition. How often are we seeing this opposition over and over again? It's so helpful, a tool in the endgame. One key here, notice, is this d pawn, holding on to this key square e5, and that is what forces the black king away. King e7, king d7, king c6, and king e6. Similar to the last one, the opposition ends the game. They could play on a little bit, but you're immediately losing this pawn and the next one. You're losing, let's say, takes here on c4 as well. Looks like a king c5 is a good move. Nice variation here after king takes a5, king c5 the engine likes, and just simply getting this pawn going as fast as possible. Black is way too slow. So a nice one there by Kasparov. I absolutely love this one with rook g7, and then even nicer move. He must have seen this when he sacrificed. He must have seen e6 when he sacked the rook. Incredible. Here we go. Next one, Kasparov with the black pieces initiating a queen trade. Remember, every king and pawn endgame was an endgame with here queens, and he initiated this knowing, Kasparov saying, wait a minute, I'm going to have 4. Let's flip this over so we can see it from his point of view. He says, let's trade queens. I'm going to have 4 pawns versus only 2. 3 to 2 is good, but 4 to 2. And my king is going to be able to support and stop these pawns. This guy helps, and the black king is close enough. c5, white is banking on these. Remember, white is also thinking, where is my passed pawn? How do I make a queen? That's how we win these games. Very first thing, safety first. King f8. King d3. f5, that stops the king. You need to be thinking about your opponent's moves. King c4, e4. We're walking a fine line with keeping our king close enough to stop the other team while simultaneously trying to count off if our pawn can make it, or our 2 pawns. How many moves do things take? So king b5, that essentially abandons this pawn. Right now that we're playing e3, it's out of the square or out of reach of the white king. c6, and it's a race. It's an all-in race. Capture, but a really nice finish here. King e7. It looks like it would have been push, queen, and white queens as well with check. But black had actually foreseen this, Kasparov, and said, no, I can get my king here. White's king has to take another move. Slowed the pawn down. Now it's e2, c7, e1. And it's black's turn. No check. Black's turn here. And he plays the simplest move, immediately ending the game. Queen e6 trade. Forcing a queen trade. And white resigns. Gelfand caught off guard here, just completely losing. This king too far away. Any move, we're just keeping him walled off. And it's white just down a king. And a pawn. Wow, Kasparov just absolutely perfect. And this one against our old friend Yasser. Let's also flip this one. Kasparov 2 versus 1. And that's where the winning pawn endgame is coming from. Really, why trying to get it here? But again, the king is so critical where the king is placed. Let's see this one. King c5, good forward move. King c3 trying to stop it. a5 and h5. A quiet move. Again, maybe trying to delay or take away waiting moves. Here, b4 it is. And a4. Now, this construction that just occurred after a4, we have a protected pass pawn. Black can now divert attention, do something else, and this is always a threat. Black's king, for example, doesn't need to always guard it. f6. He starts to slow down the two white pawns. f5, and a really nice move. Notice this king cannot come too far forward because the pawn will go, just like the last one. Kasparov says, hey, I can take a few steps back, triangulate, essentially losing a tempo. For example here, king c5 is absolutely terrible because b3. And we're promoting in the next two moves. So white's king is a bit tied to the defense of this protected pass pawn. That's one of the strengths of it. Black's king similarly needs to keep an eye on these pawns, but not as critical. Opposition. This is the opposition. For those that know that term and have been hearing me say it, this is the distant opposition. Obviously, it's a little more distant in between, but basically if they play king d4, we can answer with king d6, and that's the opposition. So with one extra move, this is going to be the opposition, or they call it distant opposition. King e3, Kasparov plays king c6, and king c5, b3, king b4, king a3 resigns. This is a close one. e5 comes, but Kasparov really played this cool. King a3 is a nice move. Let's see some different options. For example, if you capture b2, f7, and that's check. Your king doesn't really help because anytime you play king c2, it's answered with king a2, and again, queening with check. Black wins. So you can't really make a race of it. Same story goes for e6. You're on the same rank, so it's the same. And there's really no other option here. A king c3 we can push, and we're just much faster. Queen when you're playing f7, and we could do any number of good moves here. So yeah, that was really just an impressive calculation, a use of the king, protected pass pawn. We really saw it all in this one from Kasparov, distant opposition. Hope this was instructional, folks. Kasparov really great at all things in chess, but I thought the king and pawn endgames were something maybe not as touched on, and they had a lot of famous opponents here too. So really a fun one. Work on your endgames, the fundamentals of chess, and you will certainly improve. Study the great players, and that's one of the best ways to get better. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.